Hello and welcome to another edition of Tech Talk. I have with me Mr. Sinha Santos, who is the founder of OIX, Open Investment Exchange. Very warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us in the studios.
I'm glad to be here.
Now, my first question to you is fairly obvious. I have seen you speak across the world and I've followed you very closely, and that's the reason why I approached you when I found out that you were in India. But my first question is, why are you in India?
I'm in India for certain initiatives we have in India. Also, there's an event, Block Mumbai. I'm going to speak in Block Mumbai, and I'm going to talk about how India can transform itself using blockchain. That's the key purpose I'm here. And also to understand Indian economy and how things are working out here, how to get the feel of economy being at the ground.
Okay, so in the last few years, India has definitely taken strides in the right direction when it comes down to digital economy and stuff. How do you see that whole transformation going?
India has changed itself. If we talk about digital economy, India has taken a leap which is not marginal. It's a great leap. When we talk about digital economy, we're talking about digital payments. We're talking about how business is accepting as a norm. India has been using, in the past, has been using traditional mechanism to transfer money. Now people can transfer money using app. And I believe every businessman, even if you go to the small vendors, even street vendors, they are willing to accept a digital payment. If you're stuck, or if you're going traveling, you are going using taxi or even autos, they are willing to accept a digital payment. Even they prefer local app-based digital payment over any standard MasterCard or Visa as such. So the penetration of digital payments has gone too deep into the Indian economy. So this is the backbone. When we talk about digital economy, that's why I'm just talking about payment. It's not just the payment. It's about the acceptance of how it changes the behavior of business. And the behavior has changed. The ground has been the ground has been leveled for the much more better applications, technologies to breed on this ground.
So on one hand, you're saying that the people are definitely getting more in touch with the digital aspect of the economy, not using currency, hard currency per se. But that shift, I think, was an easier challenge in India because the way that the Indian government is structured, the way that the government work is done, it's very tough to go digital because of the huge volume of data that you have, just because of the population that we have. That's
the challenge, and the government has solved it. The problem is already solved. The larger part of economy is moving on the digital payments. Even if you go to villages, still people are using mix of digital payments and the cash.
Right.
But the things have been reducing. If you look into the numbers, a couple of years back and what is today, the numbers has transformed itself.
And do you see that there are sectors which are opening up in India so far as digitization in consideration, which were not initially digitized? For instance, land records and other things have not been touched for decades and for years, but now there seems to be a change coming.
No, of course. Well, when we talk about digitization, there is certain limitation how people get the digitization. There's multiple ways you can get the digitization. You can even talk about, okay, I got the snapshot of a document, put that into a specific repository, some content management tool, and then you can filter on it. But that is not the digitization. But definitely there has been a lot of land records which is available in digitized form, but that needs to be much more, I would say, technology needs to drive it more. For example, who owns for example, if you're talking about there's a trail of who owned that land.
Right.
So you may have document up there, but then is it trackable? Can you trace it down to the, say, 200 years or whatever n number of years who owned on this document? Are the taxes being paid on this in the land? So when you have the data out there, and if you see that, okay, the land records are out there, and you can match it with the tax amount, that okay, the tax should be paid on this land, and government can figure out, okay, this part of land is being taxed, this part of land is not being taxed, who owns it? because every there's a property tax. Even it's owned by even government entity, they are also paying taxes to another government entity.
Right.
So it's an inter-government exchange, but still the transaction needs to happen. And still, as we know, when we talk about data as such, the land records are available out there and across the part of the world, but still there's a lot of lands are missing. They don't know who is the owner of this land. And the number says about 33% landowners are not identified. And there's two part of it. One, who is the rightful owner of that land. Second, government is not getting revenue out of it.
Right.
So it serves the both purpose. The people who have the land, the rightful owner, it could be government entity, or the individual citizens.
Right.
In any of those cases, the rightful owner has the access to their property, and everybody knows that it's their property, and government can tax it.
Right.
So I would like to say that government is missing 30% of tax revenue on land. So when we talk about digitization, it's not just about putting the records out there, it's about the unison. When you link all this data together, and then you have the protection of the assets, like who owns the property, rightful owner, and additionally the government is getting tax revenue. So there's so many different pockets where government can tax by using the right technology and get more money, and that money can be used to serve the citizen, using the citizen services.
But there is always a question of the big brother attitude of government. If you have so much data on the people, you are basically in a position to control every single bit of their lives.
Government already has the data. I mean, your passport, if I'm traveling to this country or any other country, I have a passport. Government has my data. It has my address. And it is used to do any work. For example, if I'm opening a bank account or something, I need to present some identities. And passport can be one of them. Or driving license. So any choose a form of identity you choose, you have to provide the data. I mean, you can't. I mean, this is social life.
But I don't want them to know when I had my tooth extracted and when I went for a holiday. If it's not about government, it's about government servants. If they have so much data at their disposal, and one of them is my neighbor, what stops him from using such data against me?
Well, obfuscation, and the data is there, but there are ways that PII are removed, personal identifiable data is removed. So even if you have access to data, you basically don't know who this data is for, unless until they have the pertaining information. For example, if say there's a data link with passport or driving license, unless they have access to a driving license or maybe a couple of more data validations. For example, if you are doing identity management, for example. I have been the identity management expert for years, for decades. And we're talking about identity management thingy up here. Now what's going to happen is that when we create a system, we have to put a control. Who can access what data, when, and what kind of data inputs has to be provided before they can have access to the data. And there's when we talk about Big Brother, the system is watching the brother too. That who has access to data and when. How many times it was accessed, what time it was accessed, who accessed it, and why. So many things can be put out there in the system.
Can blockchain, see, identity management is one of the major issues that a general person faces when a lot of data of his starts getting accumulated at one place. Right now, my driving license data is at one agency, my passport data is with another agency, my purchases are with another agency. They are all siloed, they are not clubbed together for somebody to form a full knowledge of my life cycle. But at some point or the other, when all this data comes together, there is going to be that problem of who knows what. My neighbor might be accessing my driving license data, and he knows I have 3 DUIs on my name. So it's an information that can very well permeate in my whole society. But the bottom line remains: can blockchain, by the very fact that it has a very strong validation methodology through which the access is done. If you do something, it remains there forever. If you access my records, that signature remains in the blockchain forever that you accessed it. Now, tomorrow, if something like that happens, do the people have the redressal? People will have the right to take a look at who has accessed their data and why?
Basically, when we're talking about who has access to the data and why, that question goes into the purview of government, whether they want to allow people to have access to their data or not. But if it is permitted,
but
if
does blockchain provide a better methodology of controlling that, or is it just the same as any other technology?
Blockchain can help repudiate who did what.
Right.
Essentially, for example, let's take another case. let's talk about scams.
Right.
You know, I'm changing that topic a little bit more.
It's a large. You've brought the problem to the larger scale.
Yeah, so it's a larger scale problem when the banks are in trouble because somebody is helping some particular specific customer,
Right.
not in the rightful manner,
Okay.
to make them gains in unauthorized manner, right? So, for example, if there's a government, or say, for example, there's a bank official, and he's trying to do some favor, which is not the limitation, which should not be there, right? Now that if that person is doing favor or making certain changes, and the data is visible to only him or her, you know, then it's a problem. I also talked to one of the officials, government officials in India, and they had a problem. There was a scam which they controlled, and the problem was that only one person had the access to the systems, and he could change the data, and nobody had any control over it, and that person was a contractor. Now the key point is this: if you are accessing the data, if that control is placed, copy is placed at multiple places, so you can delete at one places, but you cannot delete the data at multiple places. You have to put multiple people into the account, or collude with, you have to collude with multiple people to be able to make that changes.
And you do not know who the right people are in blockchain.
And you don't know who that person is. So that makes it difficult to collude with more than one person. It could be 3, it could be 4, it could be 10, depending on how much copies you want to have at what cost.
So, two of the major drives that the Indian government had in the last few years, one of them was right of information. I think if everything is on blockchain and every single transaction is logged in as to who did what and when and why, the Right of Information Act will perhaps give people more power to access their own records and its history.
Definitely. Right of information can definitely help them understand what happened and when. Even so, basically that could put government officials at
ease, actually, because nobody can be accused out of their turn.
Correct.
It makes their life simpler and safer.
Talking of accused, there's always, when I hear the news of this election season going on in India, and there's people talking about, the election ballot boxes were changed.
Right.
They're made to work in favor of one party over other.
Right.
And that,
I think you saw the same in your United States elections as well.
That is correct as well. Basically, people are alleging that there's something wrong with the system, and that's where the blockchain can help.
Right.
If people are voting, that can be definitely put on a blockchain, and that becomes immutable. It's hard to change. You cannot change at multiple places. The voting has been done in one state, and data is sitting at another state, or maybe some other central places.
Right.
And so it's hard to replicate.
Plus, in blockchain there are multiple copies. It's not even at a central place. It's multiple copies.
It's a design how many places you want to, because it's going to be, it's not going to be on a public chain. It has to be on a private chain.
Right.
There's a lot of security data is needed, and there's a lot of, the stake is higher.
Right.
And government is not going to put its data on public, and that is understandable. And that is also, that's what we are suggesting as well. The solutions we bring.
I think the one solution that you have for government cloud can be, it's basically a backbone service, if I'm not wrong. It's something that's like an infrastructure service more than anything else. It's
infrastructure services. It's a blockchain baked into cloud.
Okay.
So the time to market, reduces the time to market and increases the ROI.
Right.
On any return on investment on any government. Even if when I talk to government officials, I gather a couple of concerns: the cost,
Right.
time. The government demands, the citizen services needs. The government wants to help citizens and requires to deliver the service faster, sooner than later, and that creates a challenge to technocrats, people who are designing the solutions,
Right.
and that's where we come as an aid. So if government wants to jump onto any solution which needs blockchain-based cloud, we can give them the infrastructure, and it's a private cloud, so it's not exposed. Government can choose which departments can have access to the data,
Right.
and how many hops they can have, and that is okay. And they only pay for what they use for.
Right.
So you don't have to bring the whole infrastructure. You don't have to build. You don't have to understand. This is a very new technology. It's extremely difficult to get technologists who can understand this and deliver this on time. I'm not saying it's impossible, but the time there's always a learning curve. We just shorten them out. We help organizations come on board, which takes less time, reduces the cost for them, and initial cost is too less compared to bringing your own infrastructure.
Now, I'm glad that you talked about the voting, because I think two countries, South Africa and Estonia, are already trying to bring voting onto blockchain, maybe not at national level, but they are certainly making attempts. Do you think that at least in India on pockets, we have things like smart cities coming up? I hope you have heard about them. So do you think that at least in smart cities and other places we can make the local government more effective and more efficient by creating a voting technology based on blockchain, through which the decision making of the smart cities can be more democratized? Suppose it, if there's a road crossing that needs to be made, a walkover bridge across the road, where should it come up? 5 locations being identified and then put on blockchain, and people vote for where they want that particular skywalk to come up. Those kind of heavy democratization can be brought in with the help of blockchain. I think you talked about this at one of the sessions. I would just like you to explain what that was all about.
Essentially, when we look at India or any other country in particular or in general, when we look at that, citizen services are basically government works for citizen, and it has been evolving. And earlier, even in India, the citizen services were there, but they were not at par as if they are today.
Yeah.
Today, everybody, like the government has a health plan for people who are in need, or probably for everyone. I don't have that too deep information on that, but I gather there has a government health plan for everyone, right? So there's so many different. The system has evolved. There's more participation, and this evolve of electronic media. Now, what is going on is that people are more vocal. They want a participation. I gather several societies are working in very close with their leaders, elected leaders, and trying to achieve citizen services for themselves. Right. Now, blockchain can empower that. It cannot be put in a India level right now, because the cost of implementation will be too high. Plus, it's not that India did not have the voting system; they already had electronic voting mechanism out there. Right? There's a cost is already incurred out there. So there has to be a gradual testing and evolution of the technology and inclusion of the technology with the existing system. When we talk about that, definitely smart cities and the Digital India initiative can include blockchain technologies and serve for citizens. For example, when we're talking about any digital smart city, in the smart city where you have electric is generated and there's a whole participation of different economic activities, right? Now, when we talk about inclusion of people can say it's a referendum, but essentially it's inclusion of citizen service, citizens into the work, right? Exactly. What decisions are being made. That's what people do. They elect a leader to do things they like them to do. It's the more inclusion of citizens in their everyday life, or if not everyday life, in the major decisions, where they can have a say that, okay, they want to build a pathway by this time frame, or there's a water system issue, there's rainwater issues, and how it could be taken care of. They can bring advices, they can get suggestions, and put them into a system where they have a voting out there from every citizen, or those who choose to participate from them. So now satisfaction will be there within the citizens, one that they got what they asked for, because more people voted for it, and that's what the democracy is about, right? If you 10 people over 5 people choose to do certain things in favor of country or the locality or the block, whatever that region may be, geographical region may be, that's going to help people get much better citizen services.
When we start talking about initiatives in India, apart from land records and apart from the voting services, there are many other sectors which can benefit from all these initiatives that are going on. We have paucity of time, but I would like you to briefly go through and run through the various aspects where you think India can benefit from blockchain technology.
I'm traveling to India and I notice there's a lot of toll. There's a lot of toll roads out there. And I would like to also talk about GST. I'm going to club them together.
Yes.
So that makes perfect sense for me.
Mhm.
So now GST is a system where the central government collects the tax and it's distributed to the different states as and when it's sold, the goods are sold to different regions. Now, things move. I mean, the product needs to move from one state to a different state, and once they get delivered, the state government or the regional government area, they get that part of the taxes, right? Now, if you put them on a blockchain, right? If the good is moving from one factory to, say, from somewhere in southern India, moving to north India or east or west, whichever part it's moving, once it goes, the data is already being sent that this good is moving from this area to that area, right? So all this toll can already be paid using that system.
Okay.
That would reduce the cost of tax collection, toll collection, and that money can be used to bring the better infrastructure, right? Plus the tax distribution can be done. So the government intent, every government intends, the taxes are there for the sake of collection, right? When I say sake of collection, I mean they are meant to be collected, right? But when the distribution is done in a rightful manner, this federal mechanism where you have a state and this center system, they all get their participation. They get all their fair share, and that reduces the collusion between state and central about the taxes.
So you see that at least in certain places where direct taxes are in consideration, for instance, road taxes and logistics and movement of goods across state lines, these are places where you can actually benefit from blockchain. If a collection of such taxes go high, it means that individual taxes can eventually start coming down. Isn't that right?
Of course, when you are collecting taxes, you know that okay, you're getting this much, because even we're collecting GST, it's basically individual taxes. We'll look into that, right? The people are paying for the things they're using, right? It's coming from the citizens only. The tax is coming from citizens, not from the companies, right? Or even from the companies with the corporate buys are out there. So I should not narrow down like that. But anyway, so taxes are being collected, and if it's a larger collection of tax, of course the government will have larger access to money, and then they can reduce that. They can pass the benefit to the citizens by reducing the personal taxes.
So blockchain.
Talking of benefit, I would like to say the government can definitely use benefits management. They can do a better benefits management. I gather there have been several sayings that benefits are not distributed evenly or not in the rightful manner. People scam. The rightful
individual people actually struggle to get their rightful money back from the government at times.
That is true. Our government has problem that even if they want to distribute to the right people, it does not reaches to the right people. There are certain people into that ecosystem who try to benefit out of it, and that creates a problem. So if you have X amount for distribution, you are probably getting X by 2 or X by 4. I don't have the right number, but definitely it's not the X which is getting distributed to the rightful owner, and that creates a problem. Plus, in turn, this all adds the problem to the citizens in general. If a subset of citizens has to get a benefit, and that benefit is not getting distributed to them, then another subset is bearing the cost of that. Right? So the benefit management is done in a right way, and when this money is which is being spent from the tax collected from another group of citizens, right? So if all the expenses are done right, or if the taxes are collected right, and when I'm talking about GST, when I'm talking about toll taxes, when I'm talking about distribution of benefits or subsidies, what they call in India. So all this, if you do them right, you can reduce the bleeding, the cost, and that can add to the whatever cost you save is a money earned. A dollar saved is a dollar earned.
Exactly. I mean, somebody walking up to a kiosk at a government office and asking for his benefit has taken up 15 minutes of government employees' time as well. That cost also is a cost to the of doing business. For
of course.
Government. And if that also starts reducing, there will be huge benefits for even the government employees. Because I think one aspect that one has to realize is that technology is good for people who are going to implement it. Governments change, employees don't. The bureaucracy and the people who are actually doing the job in front of the people, they never change. But this whole technology, when it comes in, it safeguards their interests as well.
Definitely. when we talk about technology and government changing, government is also, government is there. When we talk about the leadership changes.
Right.
The people who are in the system, in the different officials, they stay there. They may change positions for transfers or whatsoever, but they're not losing their job as such. The leadership can change. A prime minister or a minister can lose their job.
IAS and IPS will continue to the next level.
But the bureaucrats will lead the job, or the government officials will do their job. They will keep doing their job. So definitely, whichever government chooses to implement a technology, definitely another government, if the government changes, they also reap the benefit of it. It's just a cycle. It's like a relay race. If one government chooses to do something good, definitely the next government will not going to scrap that away. They're going to take the benefit out of it and probably would try to improve it.
Right. And
from their perspective.
So in Mumbai, you're going to speak about a lot of different things, and most of your focus is going to be on the government sector. Obviously, you have a lot of solutions for governments already implemented, and you are in conversation with, I think, a couple of agencies in India as well regarding implementation. But how do you see India and the rest of the world? You have traveled across the world. Do you think India is at par when it comes down to technological adoption? Are we behind? Are we ahead?
India is different. India is different. At times I get highly impressed how they implement the technology or how they safeguard the economy as such in the favor of their citizens. I would like to say that. I can back that with examples. For example, when the world economy crashed, led by United States, with the banking scams and things like those, India was protected. So at times being conservative helps.
Right.
And India has opened itself. For example, let's talk about, there has been a lot of saying that, okay, India has blocked blockchain or something as such, or India has blocked Bitcoin. Definitely, India takes a step back and then gathers. When we talk about, when you look from the top, it looks like India has blocked that technology, but that is so not true. What I know, I have talked to several agencies, and I gather that most of them are working on the initiatives which are based on blockchain.
Right.
It seems like they're working in silos, but that is also not correct. Definitely they're working in silos, but there are several initiatives which is the backbone. For example, if you look into the initiatives by Niti Ayog,
right,
which is working on something called India Chain, and when I look at that initiative, that is huge. They are taking the biggest problem. They are taking the payments. They have a payment mechanism they're trying to bring on the India Chain.
Okay.
And when the India digitized the payment mechanism, government came with its own app.
Right.
So when I gather that news, at times that sounds like competing.
Right.
But then why not? Government does business too.
What?
Government has owns financial systems. Government has owned industries. There's several thermal, electric generations.
There are many sectors in which government. Historically, we even owned cement factories. Government even owned their own cement factories.
So if government can own a cement factory, if government can own a electric company, why not a payment company?
Right.
So that highly impressed me. And people might say that India is competing, government is competing with other partners, but probably government needs its own mechanism. Government needs its own system where people can trust. Today, that Indian government payment system is used by all the larger e-commerce vendors, whether it's a MasterCard or Facebook, WhatsApp, or even Amazon and other partners, Paytm and other companies. So they all are using their backbone, and that's helping, that pays for itself. All the transactions and the cost of transactions are being paid by the users of the systems.
There's another aspect to it which is very unique to India. You can find n number of airline operators to operate within India because the air traffic is growing, but nobody would fly on an unviable sector. For instance, somebody going off to Guwahati or places where planes only fly 1/4 full will not attract a lot of private players. Similarly, private players, even in payment gateways, do not want to actually go to areas where the efforts are very high and the returns are low, for instance, rural areas and others, but they need to be brought into the digital economy too. And I think UPI and other initiatives that have been taken by the government, they actually serve the purpose because they work towards working in areas where others, private players, might not go and work.
So essentially, when a private enterprise goes for the business, their sole aim is to make profits.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when government goes into the business, they do make profits. They should be making profits, but there's a more inclusion of the, say, unbanked when you're talking about banking system. You know, there's a several population which is unbanked, which is another initiative from Government of India, where they use existing post services as a bank, and I think that will transform how the Indian economy is today. It may sound like that it's not that a big initiative, but you will see eventually other countries following the suit.
And are you bullish on India, or do you think that it's going to take time?
I'm extremely bullish on India. India has arrived.
Okay.
But of course, there's a huge population. That also means there's a huge business out there.
Mm-hmm.
So from the business perspective, from the evolution perspective, every country has a pace, and with this large number of population, everything becomes difficult.
Right.
And when we create any project, any solution, we always talk about that number of users, concurrent number of users. And when you come to India, probably it's the biggest challenge. Things can become slow. I'm not talking about slow as a process. I'm talking about the system.
Yeah.
Because performance management is a huge concern. You know, this can be a huge testing ground actually. So when we come to India, India presents a great opportunity in terms of market,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why you see all the large companies are here. Everybody's here.
Yeah, and I think everybody is
or wants to be here.
Those who are not here would much rather be here than anywhere else, if you ask me. But
and it presents a safe political environment historically.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have any huge problems as such which can make you run away from this country.
Even if two opposing parties win consequent elections, there aren't going to be real conflicts when it comes down to the good of the people and the good of the economy.
Essentially. So it presents a safe market for people to do business as well.
I hope that you have a very successful round in Block Mumbai. I'll perhaps gather you up again in a couple of hours and we'll talk a little more. But thank you so much for talking to us right now.
Thank you for bringing me here.
Thank you.